Most people don't believe in miracles until one breathes down their neck. It happened to Sebastian on the day that was supposed to be his last. He stood at the edge of a bridge, gripping the cold metal rail, while the dawn had yet to cut through the night. The city below exhaled in sleep, indifferent, distant, heavy. People rushed through their lives unaware that someone hovered between being. He felt empty. Inside only silence and one question: why keep going? That's when he heard a voice behind him. If you jump, everything will begin again, but not the way you expect. He turned. No one was there, just the early fog, dim streetlights, and a shadow. It didn't belong to anything, it simply existed. Who are you? Sebastian asked, slowly sitting down on the pavement. He wasn't afraid anymore, only strangely calm, as if some ancient part of him knew it was never truly alone. I am the one who comes at dawn, when fate is ready to rewrite the script. And you've already taken the first step, Sebastian. Me. I just wanted to disappear, and yet, here you are, you appeared. After that, something shifted. That night he couldn't sleep, not from fear but from the strange quiet inside him which no longer felt like his own. It was as if someone had whispered a code into his chest, and his soul was trying to decipher it. The next day, in the subway, he noticed a woman with a suitcase. She stared directly at him, even though the train was crowded. As the doors opened, she said, "You chose to stay. They know now." Sebastian stepped off the train. She stayed inside. Only then did he realize her eyes were completely white, no pupils, and yet, she saw him clearer than anyone else ever had. He started seeing signs, numbers, repeating phrases, people speaking to him as if they'd waited years for this moment. An old man on a bench once told him, "Don't search for God in temples. He writes in the air. Learn to read it." A girl in a dusty bookstore handed him a book without a cover and said, "It's your story, still being written." Sebastian decided to find out what was happening. And the more he searched, the more the lines between worlds began to blur. A childhood friend he hadn't seen in years messaged him out of nowhere. "You hear the voice in the mornings too, don't you?" "What voice?" "The one that tells you, you're not ordinary." Sebastian didn't reply, but inside something stirred. This was no coincidence. One evening he wandered into a small cafe he'd never seen before. Behind the counter stood a man in a black shirt. His eyes were different colors, one deep brown, the other violet. "You're not here by accident," the man said without looking up. "You're ready to hear why you're alive." Sebastian sat down. The man pulled out a card, not a playing card, not tarot, a living card, symbols moved on it, images flashing. The bridge, the subway woman, the book. "This is your life, or one version of it." Am I going insane? No, you're waking up. Each day Sebastian began to feel more. When someone lied, he heard it like a crack in the air. When someone suffered, his chest grew heavy. When someone died, he tasted metal in his mouth. He was becoming tuned. The world was no longer ordinary, but then someone told him, "You're not receiving this for free." "Then what is it for?" "For choosing to stay. But now you must choose which world you want to stay in." That night a boy appeared in his dream, bright, gentle, with wings made of ash and sand. He whispered, "You carry the code. We've been waiting for you to open it. And don't be afraid, Sebastian, you are one of us." Sebastian no longer belonged to himself, or to the world he once knew. Every morning began with the strange sense that his body was just a shell, and something deeper pulsed inside him. He felt like the air itself whispered his name. Even silence wasn't just silence anymore, it carried messages. He stopped eating meat, stopped watching the news, pulled away from everything that once defined him. Instead he listened, to birds, to trees, to dreams. And one night in a dream he heard, "You are close. 7 steps in total. You've already taken 6. He woke up in a sweat. On the window glass drawn from the inside was the number 1. The next morning, as he entered the metro, he saw a man reading, him. Not a book, him. A man in his 50s, wearing a blazer and holding a black cane, stood in the train car silently mouthing words as if reading Sebastian's thoughts printed on his skin. When the train stopped, the man approached, placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "You think you're searching for the path, but it's the path that's searching for you. You were sealed at birth, but the code has started to unlock. Now you will be tested." "Who are you?" Sebastian asked. He didn't know what the 3rd cycle was or what the 5th point meant, but deep down he felt this wasn't random. That day, distortions began. If you can stand without fear, you'll see what was hidden. And then came the impossible moment. At the bus stop, a young boy, maybe 10, walked up to him. "Are you Sebastian? I have a key for you." From his small coat pocket, he pulled out an old, twisted key with the numbers chapter 23 verse 32 engraved on its stem. "I don't know what it opens, but they said you would." Sebastian took it. 1,000 questions filled his head, but the boy just smiled and ran. That night the trial began. He found himself in a version of his city, but warped. The sky was green, people had blank faces, everything moved like a dream on the edge of a nightmare. At a crossroads, 3 paths unfolded before him. Eternal evening, black dawn, a stairway to the sky, with no steps, a voice echoed from nowhere and everywhere. The choice will define who you become, not who you've been. Sebastian chose the stairway. There were no steps, but with each move forward a step appeared beneath his foot. He walked on air. At the top stood a man with no face but eyes that held galaxies. "Do you know what you carry?" he asked. "No, but I feel it's more than me. It's not something. It's you, without your shell, and now you must decide. Will you give yourself to the world or swallow the world into you? I don't understand." "You will, when you remember." Light consumed him. He woke up in his bed. Next to him was the same book without a cover. But now it read, Chapter 1, You Chose to Rise. Inside were words he was sure he never wrote, yet written in his own handwriting. When the soul remembers its mission, the body no longer fears death. Sebastian looked out the window. It was just another day. But he knew, this was no longer the same world. He had received his first key, and made his first choice, but what lay ahead would go even deeper. Sebastian began to sense the world differently, as if the fabric of reality had thinned. He could feel thoughts lingering in rooms, hear intentions before words formed, and sometimes he'd see flashes of light around people about to die, or drastically change their fate. But the strangest thing began happening exactly at 11:32 p.m. Every night at the same time, everything paused, clocks stopped ticking, electricity hummed unnaturally, the air itself pulled away from his skin, and for a few moments he wasn't here. One night at 11:32 p.m. he stepped outside. The world was frozen under a glass dome. Streetlights flickered in slow motion, no people, no sounds, and then he appeared. A tall man in a gray coat, hands in his pockets. He had no face, yet radiated a presence so familiar, it struck Sebastian deep in the soul. "You've crossed the point of no return," the man said. "Now you exist between time, between choices." "Who are you?" Sebastian asked, calm, not afraid, only reverence. "We are the Watchers, the ones who observe the cycles. You are in your 3rd cycle. The first 2, you failed. Did I die before? You forgot. You didn't die, but you lost yourself. Now you're beginning to remember, and that is dangerous." Sebastian felt a tremble, not in his body, but in his soul. Why dangerous? Because once you remember who you are, you can never live as you did before. You'll no longer be just human. Suddenly, the air changed, the world lit up, and Sebastian found himself inside his own room. But not the room he knew. No paintings, chalk circles drawn on the floor, and in the center, a younger version of himself, maybe 10 years old, sitting cross-legged, staring at him. "You've become me, but I have not yet become you," the boy said. "Is this a memory? It's a loop. It begins in you and ends in me. If you break it, you'll awaken what sleeps inside." Just then, a light broke through the wall, not daylight, not artificial. It felt like light from another universe. From it stepped 7 hooded figures, their faces replaced by mirrors. They stared at both versions of him with silent precision. One spoke, "Code activated. Mission undefined. Residual fear 18%. Awakening potential acceptable." Sebastian shouted, "What does this mean? What are you doing to me? We are not creators. We are transmitters. You chose to activate yourself, Sebastian. Now you must remember what you've been guarding." A portal tore open in the air, like the fabric of space had burned through. He saw a field in the rain, a boy running barefoot, a book falling into a puddle, and a voice. "That's where it all began before you became human. Go back, remember." He stepped through the portal. His body vanished, only his essence remained. He stood on a hill, wind, rain, the ground felt alive beneath his feet. He was a child again, and he knew this was him, but before time, before form, a woman in white approached, eyes like ancient birds, sharp, silent, endless. She touched his forehead. Everything vanished. Sebastian woke up in a hospital, doctors shouting, monitors beeping, his body shaking. A nurse leaned over him, repeating, "He's back. He's with us again." On his wrist, a tattoo that hadn't been there before. 11:32 he turned to the window. Outside stood the man in gray, watching him. And then he vanished into the air. 3 days had passed since Sebastian woke up in the hospital. He barely spoke, barely slept, barely ate. But inside him, a storm was raging, loud as thunder in a desert sky. The doctor said his heart had stopped for 33 seconds, but Sebastian knew. It didn't stop, it rebooted. He kept staring at the numbers chapter 11 verse 32 tattooed on his wrist. A mark that felt less like ink and more like a seal placed by those who knew truths this world refused to see. He sensed it wasn't just a number. It was a key, a passage to where soul promises are stored. On the 4th night, exactly at 11:32 p.m., he woke not from noise but from a pulse of light. Everything around him faded. He stood in a vast white hall, endless and shadowless. In the center stood her. The woman with bird-like eyes, are you ready to remember? He nodded. She raised her hand and a glowing sphere emerged from her palm. Inside it, fragments spun like memories encoded in light, Sebastian in his mother's womb. Ageless and vast, and then he remembered, long before earth, before flesh, before language. At a great council of light he made a vow. I will descend, I will forget, I will fall into fear, pain and doubt, but when the time comes I will remember, and carry light into the places that fear it most. But once born, fear swallowed it all. He became human, he forgot, he ran from himself, from truth, from others. Until that moment, on the edge of the bridge, and the choice was made again. Back in the White Hall, the seven appeared, the mirror-faced beings with crystalline hands and robes of glowing threads. You have remembered the vow, one said. Now comes the choice, you may return to the human world. Live as a guide, keep the body, carry the pain, or remain here as light, without fear but without form. What do you choose, Sebastian? He closed his eyes. He saw his mother's face, a girl he once helped on the street, the laughter of his younger brother, the old man who once whispered, God writes in air, learn to read, and he understood. Light isn't escape, light is return. He opened his eyes and said, I choose to return. The White Hall trembled. Everything vanished. He found himself in a park surrounded by ordinary people, but he was no longer ordinary. He felt everyone, who was hollow, who was faking, who was close to breaking, and he began to speak, to sit, to look into their eyes, and each person who heard him say, you are not alone, suddenly knew it was true. Years passed, Sebastian was never seen in interviews. He had no social media, but people told stories, stories of a man who changed them with presence, with silence, with a single word. He lived in the world but was not of it. And every night, at 11:32 p.m., he would look up at the sky, and somewhere, a hidden star would appear, one only visible to those who had remembered who they truly are. Dizzy the end.